Welcome to Unit 2 of Strategic Business Consulting. This material begins the material that starts Exam 2. And here we're going to cover some material that's in both Chapter 7, which is about merger and acquisition strategy, and Chapter 9, which is about strategic alliances, and combine those two into this lecture, which is about the scope of the firm, which has to do with the number of products, the number of geographic regions, as well as the number of processes, different activities that you're involved with in your firm. So that's what those two chapters have in common. There are two major ways of looking at scope. There's horizontal scope and vertical scope. Horizontal scope is just the range of products and service segments that a firm serves within its focal market. So this is sometimes prone to monopoly legislation. This is if you have the market cornered, right? You sell every single product, whatever it is, every single bicycle, every single automobile, every single social media outlet. If you own all of those within a market, that's horizontal scope. All right, and there's no room for competitors to come in. That would be a monopoly. So vertical scope is the extent to which a firm's internal activities encompass the activities in the value chain. So you can either go up towards your supplier or down towards your customer, right? And so some companies, they just are content to do one or two activities, maybe around manufacturing. They don't sell directly to customers. They aren't their own supplier. Other companies have a larger vertical scope, right? And so they create their own supply to create their product, and then they have stores to directly interface with their customers. So that's what vertical scope's all about. We are going to start out by talking about horizontal scope and the benefits of horizontal scope. So there's a few benefits. The first is economies of scale. And just to remind you guys what economies of scale is that you can spread out your fixed costs, right? The costs that don't go up as you increase product over more product, right? So you have a factory, it's a certain size. You would like to divide the cost of that factory, the monthly rent for the factory or whatever, over as many products as possible, right? And so as you produce more product in the same factory, that lowers the average total cost of each product, which in turn is going to boost your profit margin, right? Because the average cost for each product that you sell to the customer is lower. Similar idea is economies of scope. But this time we're thinking more about different inputs that go into the products that you sell. And the idea here is that as you sell more product, more different types of products, some of the same inputs, some of the same processes, some of the same workers, maybe some of the same raw materials can go into multiple products, right? And so if you're, again, like a Johnson & Johnson and you have expertise in first aid stuff, or you have expertise in sticky adhesive stuff, you spread that expertise out over as many products as possible rather than just having a handful or small amount. The more you spread those costs out, the better. And also, so expertise in one area may give you expertise in related areas, as we've talked about in previous chapters. The third reason for increasing horizontal scope goes back to what I talked about on the last slide about monopoly power. Of course, you don't have to go all in and get a full monopoly, but it does reduce market rivalry, right? As you grow your business, maybe you acquire another business, or you just expand organically and increase your sales, you're going to get a bigger share of the market. So that reduces market rivalry. The fourth one is bargaining power over suppliers and buyers. If you are a company that suppliers need, right, because you sell so many product, and they just got to have you, right, then they're going to offer you a better rate, right? And so that gives you power over suppliers. In terms of buyers, if you have a bigger share of the market, you're going to have more power to be a price maker rather than a price taker with buyers, right? So if you have 50% of the market, that gives you that bargaining power with buyers. And that goes back to the one before, the market rivalry, so that you can control the price level. And then finally, enhancing knowledge and capabilities. As you grow your business and branch out into other things, there's this notion in strategic management called absorptive capacity. And it's actually the same with the human brain. The idea is that the more you know, the more you're able to learn. And so your absorptive capacity relies on the stuff that's already in your brain. And it's the same with an organization. Organizations that have their hands in a lot of things and know how to do a lot of things are, I mean, there's costs associated with that, but on the plus side, they're able to learn better, and they may be able to use knowledge that they learn in one place and apply it to other areas of the company. But also just, having multiple capabilities allows you to gear up and build even more capabilities on top of the ones that you have. Whereas if you have a very narrow range of capabilities, it's harder to build. It's kind of that notion that where they say, like, scientific advancement, and scientists of today, they'll say they stand on the shoulders of giants. It's kind of the same idea, you building on past knowledge and capabilities. So if you have past knowledge and capabilities built up, by being in multiple segments, you're going to be able to acquire more. Okay, and then vertical integration is about expanding the range of activities either backwards or forward. And I just talked about this a minute ago, but here's the slide with the official language. Backward integration is going to involve entry into activities previously performed by suppliers or other enterprises positioned along earlier stages of the industry value chain system. So Amazon became a book publisher, right? That was backward integration. And then forward integration involves entry into value chain activities that are closer to the end user. Honda started out as an engine company, right? And they were like, hey, let's start making our own motorcycles. Let's start making our own automobiles and selling those directly to the customer rather than selling, our engines to Mitsubishi and letting them capture those rents. So we looked at reasons for integrating horizontally. Now we're going to look at reasons for integrating vertically. So what are some reasons for backwards integration? First of all, you get to potentially reduce your costs of major inputs. So if you can figure out a way to get your inputs cheaper if you do it yourself, then or by acquiring a supplier, that's a good reason to do it. You reduce supplier power. So if you've got a supplier that's like taking you for a ride and you're just like, hey, I'm tired of putting up with this, I'm just going to do it myself. That may be a reason for a backward integration. It helps you to assure the quality and the quantity of critical inputs. If you're having trouble with the supplier in terms of the quality or the amount of product that they're of input that they're providing you, you may want to take things into your own hand. And then finally, it helps you protect proprietary know-how, right? And so anytime you partner up with a supplier, it's going to give that supplier a lot of insight into what it is you do, into the design of your product or service, and there may be actors within their organization, or they themselves may take what you're doing and run with it because they're exposed to those ideas. And so doing it yourself protects that proprietary know-how. Okay, so there are also a few reasons for integrating vertically in a forward direction. The first being you might be able to lower your overall cost by increasing channel efficiency. So if you believe that you can distribute your product more efficiently with lower costs, or maybe with cutting out a middleman, and ultimately get a better profit margin by doing it yourself, that would be a good reason to vertically integrate. The second reason would be a marketing decision, and that's just to gain better access to end users. So you better understand your customer and what your customer wants. And then finally, to strengthen and reinforce brand awareness and by putting your name and brand directly in front of customers. You can think about things like the Apple Store as one example of that, but it's a branding promotion type decision. So those are the three major reasons for integrating vertically in a forward direction. So when you're deciding to do this, what should you be asking yourself? Here's a list of questions that you ask yourself before you decide whether to vertically integrate. First, will vertical integration help lower cost? Will it help build expertise? Or will it protect my proprietary know-how? We've talked about all of those topics, but you need to know that, and the answer to those things needs to be, to at least one of those things needs to be yes. Second, what impact will vertical integration have on flexibility and response times? If you have an unreliable supplier or a distributor, you may be able to improve your response times and maybe be more flexible if you feel like they're not flexible and good at meeting customers' changing maybe marketing needs. On the other hand, the vertical integration can reduce your flexibility, right? If the environment changes, if the things we talked about in chapter 2 with Porter's 5 forces and those kind of things and what customers are demanding changes, you've got to pivot, right? And the bigger and more cumbersome your organization is, the more difficult it is to pivot. If you've got to change every aspect of your organization in response to some kind of environmental change, that can be problematic. If if someone else is supplying your product for you or distributing your product for you, and the environment changes, you can very quickly change your supplier and your distributor. You may have to pay out the end of your contract, but it'd be a lot better than completely missing out on a market shift. And so actually there's more flexibility a lot of times if you're smaller, if you're not vertically integrated. Third, what administrative costs are incurred by coordinating operations across more activities? When you're calculating whether you should expand the organization or not, you don't want to exclude administrative costs from your calculation. As an organization grows in complexity, grows in number of locations, grows in number of managers and levels of management, the costs really scale up along with the increase in the size of the organization. A lot of times you don't get much economies of scale with management, and you've got to kind of increase management and or at least coordination costs with the size of the organization. 4, how difficult will it be to acquire the skills and capabilities needed to operate in another stage of the vertical chain? So this is a capabilities question. Can I pull it off? Is it difficult to learn all this stuff? What kinds of capabilities do I have to develop in the organization to do distribution for my company or to be my own supplier? So what's involved with that, and can I get the smart people in to put things together and pull this off? And so that's a big consideration as well. The flip side of vertical integration is outsourcing, right? Rather than growing the firm, you're shrinking the firm and letting someone else do the activities. And you'll see a lot of the same logic holds, but here we're talking about decreasing the scope of the firm. And this has been a 21st century trend. A couple things have happened. The main thing is that the internet and the availability of knowledge, the ability to scan your environment for outsourcing partners much more efficiently, especially for small businesses, has really changed the game. And you combine that with kind of the what the literature, what the MBA programs are teaching students about the importance of core competencies and doing things that are in your core, and maybe letting somebody else do things that are their core competency. When you combine that piece with the internet piece, companies are looking for partners to do outsourcing with, and it has been a 21st century trend. So when should you consider outsourcing some activity in your organization? First off, you want to do that if it can be performed better or more cheaply by outsiders. So pretty straightforward there, right? If somebody else can do it better and more efficiently, it makes sense to outsource it. You're going to save money and or have a higher quality product. Second, if it's not crucial to achieving competitive advantage, then it makes sense to outsource it. You don't want to outsource things that are really at the crux of where you create value for your customers, because if you do, you risk giving a really valuable piece of your organization up to somebody else, and they're going to start capturing that value. And over time, you may sign a first contract with somebody that you outsource with, and it makes sense to do it. But if there's a competitive advantage in that activity, when that contract's up and you have to renew or find somebody else, the terms won't be as favorable because they'll know that you can't do it yourself. Because at that point, your history and capabilities, that knowledge begins to hollow out some. Consider outsourcing if it speeds the time up to market. So if we can do things quicker to get a new product out or just to get products in the hands of the customers, that's a good reason to outsource. You might let Amazon handle all of your deliveries. That's a pretty common way of outsourcing for small business anyway. Fourth, it reduces risk for new technology or buyer preferences. I talked about this on the last slide, but being a large, cumbersome organization that does lots of activities makes you inflexible. If you outsource a lot of different activities, you can quickly pivot and go to a different supplier that better fits your needs if and when you need that. And so it improves that organizational flexibility. When you're outsourced, when you're more outsourced, you can pivot more quickly just by changing the companies that you deal with rather than having to completely reinvent yourself. The fifth one, it allows you to concentrate on your core business and better leverage key resources. And I've talked about that one. If you do decide to outsource, there are some risks associated with that. And that's what this slide covers. We've already hinted at these risks. So we've talked about the advantages of integration as well as the upsides of outsourcing. But here you can kind of see the other side of that coin. And there's two major categories of risks. There's knowledge and capabilities related risks. And that's just that idea related to like absorptive capacity and loss of control of a particular function that is integral to your competitive advantage. And so you don't want to lose your ability to do things. You don't want to lose firm capabilities that are vital to your profitability. So losing those over time, right? When you outsource something, there's going to be organizational forgetfulness that occurs very, very quickly, especially if you let employees go that are now superfluous because you've outsourced the activity. And so if you ever think you might want to do it again because of reasons related to your competitive advantage, outsourcing would be a bad idea. The second big category are transaction costs. There's a whole area of economics called transaction cost economics. But here we're talking about the risk of letting a third party do things for you. And not necessarily just loss of knowledge, but kind of mistakes that they make, or there could be shady business on their end. If you outsource to a foreign country, rules may not be as strict about intellectual property there. So there's a few things. The first is the lack of incentives for outside parties to make investments specific to your firm's value chain, right? So if you're doing it yourself, you're really investing in making sure that the long-term health of your organization is, at the forefront of your decision making. But an outside party, that would not be their motivation. Second is loss of direct control, right? And so now we're talking about things like quality, like controlling the process itself, maybe ethical concerns, right? IKEA outsourced some of their uh, creating their textiles, right? The cloth that covered their furniture to some outside vendors, and those vendors used child labor. IKEA didn't directly use the child labor, but they were definitely tainted by that, and so those business ethics principles. Again, this is kind of related to knowledge, but you can get your proprietary knowledge stolen if you outsource things. And so for those reasons, it can be a risky game to outsource to a third party that doesn't have your best interests at heart. And so, you may need to have a backup plan if a partner isn't doing the job, if they're not up to the standard that you expected. So that concludes this presentation on the scope of the firm.